Welcome to the 11 Warriors show for Thursday, May 2nd, 2024. I'm Jason Priestess. That's Chris Slaughterback and Ramzy Nasrallah of 11 Warriors. Gents, how are you guys?
Pretty good.
Wonderful Thursday morning in the capital city. It'll be 84 in Columbus today.
84, huh?
Yeah.
He's not quite 84, but some tough news yesterday. Seth Towns told ESPN he's not going to go for a ninth season of college basketball, which, kind of breaks my heart, man. I thought that was one of the cooler, funnier stories in the sports world. This is the guy that, of course, started at Harvard, the 2016-17. He, started playing hoops 4 years before COVID. That's insane to me. And, a spell at Ohio State. And this past season, he was at Howard. I think he's got 2 degrees already. I'm pretty sure he does. I think he's got 2 diplomas, an undergrad and a master's. And knock it out, man. Go be an MD, Seth. Play a couple more years, man. Go do that.
You know what they call guys that started at Harvard 9 years ago? Doctor.
Right? Yeah. He seems like a bright dude, but I did get a chuckle every season about, another Seth Towns year and kind of cheered for him to keep playing. I honestly did, man. I like the guy.
Dude, ninth year. 9 years of college, he's just lapping all of us. It's good for him.
Yeah, he was a half and half. 8 years of college basketball, played 4 years. 4 of the years he did not play a single game. So it worked out to averaging about 14 games a year that he played over that span. And
you know what his school loans are?
30-some game season.
He's got nothing to pay.
Oh, yeah. God
he was on
bless
scholarship
him.
the whole time.
To him. But, yeah, it's just wild. He was in college for 8 years, but literally 4 medicals and 4 actually playing.
He's going to have to keep a binder for his college IDs. He won't even go put all of them in his wallet. It looked like Dan Hope's wallet, right? If he puts all of them in there at one time.
Can you imagine the size of your liver after 9 years of college?
No. And what do you do? Maybe those first couple of years, you're dating girls that are undergrad. By the time you're 24 and
dating professors,
16?
Yeah,
he's probably 26 years old, 27 years old. Do you date TAs at that point in time? How does that work?
9 years of college means that you're in school at the same time as third graders when you were a senior in high school. I just did that math.
Oh my gosh. That's an incredible way of looking at it. Wow. Portal closed the other day. OSU did pretty well. I don't know how we're here. I think we all spoke on this show recently about 1 or 2 guys piecing out from the quarterback room, but Ohio State finds itself with all 5 scholarship quarterbacks still in the program. And I don't know how that happens, or I'm at a loss of words for how it happened. I figured at least one would be gone. You have to see the writing on the wall.
I have my theories. I think Lincoln Keyholtz is in love with a girl that's at Ohio State. This isn't 11 Warriors TMZ. I'm just going off of social media posts. And on top of that, you wouldn't leave a bench situation at a program like Ohio State for a bench situation somewhere else. So there's no premium or bonus to do that before next season, especially when there's a chance you could get some a fistful of Jostins if the season goes the way they expect it to.
Yeah, really interesting that nobody transferred, to your point. I thought at least one would go for sure, but obviously great for Ryan Day. It gives them that much more time to kind of eyeball these guys. And maybe part of the reason is the pecking order isn't as clear as maybe even, some might speculate. It kind of that, behind the starter maybe. So gives them a little bit more time to evaluate, gives those players a little bit more time to evaluate. And yeah, I'm glad they're all sticking around because, I don't think we know exactly what that true batting order from 1 to 5 should look like if they all stayed. So see what kind of work they can do over the summer.
They all have a shot.
He should want them all to be here so he can look at them further.
When was the last year, wire to wire, that there wasn't a quarterback with an injury? CJ played gimpy a couple of years. He obviously handled it better than Kyle McCord did, who was gimpy most of last year. Devin Brown got in. He got hurt. Actually, Lincoln Keyholtz, I don't think got hurt in the Cotton Bowl. That's the one.
Yeah, there's a win. You're right.
And, especially with his offensive line.
And for a team that, could play 16, 17 games this year, some of these guys are probably hey, I'm an injury away from getting my shot. And if there's no defined order, they haven't named a starter. They don't probably have an idea who's looking like they will start, but there's no named starter right now. So it's probably wide open to some of these guys in their own head.
The caretaker is also Chip Kelly. It's also, you're not being looked after by Urban Meyer's Nepo baby wide receiver son masquerading as a quarterback's coach.
Ohio State lost 6 players from the spring portal. Running back Dallin Hayden, wide receiver Keon Grays, offensive guard Inak Bamahi, linebacker Nigel Glover, safety Jihad Carter, and safety Cedric Hawkins. All backups, kind of depth guys. I don't know. I mean, Hayden, I get. That's probably the guy most Buckeye fans would want to keep out of that bunch, man, for some depth and maybe a guy for next year. But I get it, man. Judkins arrived. He wanted to go before he could play. And he's in Colorado, and he's going to have a fun time out there. A bunch of depth guys. So Ohio State, man, did really well. Kept all their quarterbacks. Didn't lose anyone of major significance. Nigel Glover's a guy. I think the beat guys were laughing the other day about Ramzy. You said something, and they were like, yeah, it's a guy we always forget is on the team. Came over from Northwestern the year before. He should just stay at Northwestern, honestly. I mean, that's the move.
Yeah.
If I told you, like, the headline was Nigel Glover's returning for the BBC reboot of The Office,
yeah,
you'd be like, oh, it's like that. I forgot that guy existed.
Yeah, Nigel Glover was in Doctor Who, man. Like, he's definitely a British dude. He's not an Ohio State football player. Jihad Carter, interesting case, guy from Syracuse that played for them, came here and never really sniffed the field. It does leave Ohio State a little bit short with safety depth. I mean, the guys they have are amazing. So you look at, what they might do, because the thing with the portal is it's closed to enter it, but teams can add still. So, yeah. I mean, we last looked at the numbers. I think it was like 70 or 80% hadn't found a destination yet. There's some guys in there, and Ohio State could have up to 5 scholarships at play. What do you guys think happens? Do they go for a guard? Do they get depth at safety? Maybe a running back? Do you reward a walk-on? Anything on your wish list?
I think they'll take a flyer on a 1-year offensive tackle that's, somewhere between the best day Enoch Vamahi ever had and serviceable. Like the worst that Josh Simmons was last year. One where there's like no option to buy. If it doesn't work out next year, you don't got to worry about it. They've probably learned some lessons. I wrote about Vic Cutler a couple months ago. The second he walked into the Woody, like, I had people telling me, I looked at him like, that guy doesn't play here. He's never going to play here. And it speaks to a larger issue. There's too many guys like that that have been coming through the roster. They did some good cleanup here. All the guys that they lost to the portal this year, they were depth guys, but depth like you never wanted to see it. Like if Cedric Hawkins was on the field, that must have meant something absolutely horrible when it went awry. And same with Vamahi. He's not a Big Ten player, and that's, you got to go back and examine, like, what was the thought process there that a place like Ohio State ended up with a guy like that. I think Jihad Carter couldn't get past injuries. I don't think they'll go after a safety. What's the value prop there, Chris? Like, come be the 7th guy we're going to play in a safety-driven defense. And by the way, we've got some guys showing up this fall. We'll probably pass you pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's a good point about the incoming class.
Yeah, you could maybe at safety be the 5th guy, to your point. I don't think that's the top of the list, just because, you'd only be going for depth because you've got Ransom and Downs. Obviously, you got Sonny if you needed him as a guy that might be better than somebody you would bring in on top of Bonsu, on top of Hartford, on top of McLean, who looked good in the spring game. So yeah, you'd be kind of buried. For me, knowing that they do have some room to play with, just because they have 85, I guess I don't necessarily have to use 85, but I would like to see, if it'd be telling to see if, well, maybe just depends. Like they've talked about Caffey, right? Like Dallin Hayden's actually, out of all those guys you listed, like that's a decent player, right? That's someone who can go start somewhere else and probably will, right? Like Ohio State just has an embarrassment of riches right there versus these other positions. Like, yeah, you could say those guys are blocked, but they're probably going to continue to be blocked, right? Because they would just get other guys better than them probably. But Hayden eventually could have at least been a backup here, probably, those other guys that you'd be fine having in the game. But TC Caffey, if that's a guy now that they're saying, you've got James Peoples, who looked good, Sam Williams-Dixon, obviously a little lower level recruit, but looked good in the spring game. But you've heard Day almost talk about Caffey kind of like he did X. So it's like, who eventually was rewarded with a scholarship. So I wonder if Caffey may not get one, if he's going to be that, that 3rd/4th running back, maybe, that rotates with Peoples or something when you get into those maybe garbage time or, certain situations. So right guard, right tackle, like one or the other kind of thing, to me is at the top of the list if you can find somebody, for the reasons you said, Ramzy. I mean, you've got to have some depth there, on top of the fact I don't know that, at least me personally, don't love exactly what they think they're going to roll out there right now. So it seems like you'd at least want some more rotational pieces on the right side. But that'd be my first. Seeing if Caffey could get a Scully would be next. And then after that, yeah, you're probably looking at either a safety or, with Keon Graysley and leaving, you could at least make a case for trying to get a little bit more depth at receiver. Don't think that guy's going to play a bunch, but you might want to bring in another body.
I mean, you might be able to get a safety for depth that wants a ring, that wants to be part of something great and make maybe he's a Bowling Green or Toledo or something and is a good, decent depth safety for this team and says, I want to fly to my games instead of taking the bus, or I want to be part of that. So you may be able to do that. Do you guys, Urban Meyer, I don't think he ever knew the names of any walk-ons ever. No. Do you guys think Ryan Day has a soft spot for walk-ons because he went to New Hampshire? And he understands that, that life of not being, a parade All-American going to the big schools. Do you think he does? Is that my hallucinating here?
That might be extending the truth of it. I think Urban was absolutely ruthless, if you want to go to extremes. I don't think that Ryan Day's at the other extreme, but I think he's too close to it. And you can see it in some of the guys that they lost. What we didn't talk about in terms of the safety depth and leaving the room because it happened in December, Cam Martinez, another guy who just reminds me of what Tecmo Bowl looked like in week 1 when you were playing against a secondary that they just ran in a circle, didn't cover anyone. That just how do guys like that get on the roster, let alone on the damn field? He needs to be a little bit more urban and a little bit less sympathetic. That's what charity's for, man. That's what walk-on programs are for. It's not what scholarships and roster depth are for.
I agree, but I think historically you always have misses. Every class has several misses. Some of them highly rated 5 stars. Vamahi was one of the best linemen in the country coming out of high school, highly rated lineman. He's out in Hawaii, maybe a little harder to scout, but I don't know, man. I think there's probably some of that at play, but at the same time, I think it's the nature of the game too.
There are entire positions in less than great shape. The offensive line was the heart and soul of the Urban Meyer dynasty. And Ohio State hasn't won a Big Ten title in quite some time. And the offensive line is consistently maybe they'll be okay type of prognostication. We shouldn't be talking about Ohio State's offensive line the way that we're talking about Ohio State's offensive line. And it begins with recruiting. You can say what you want about late stage Studwara and current Justin Fry, but it's a combination of bad things. And on top of that, having a tight ends room that's no longer coached by Kevin Wilson, that has an internal hire that's thought very highly of, but came from the receiver room. We just lost Cade Stover to the NFL. Great receiving threat, looks awesome coming off the bus. Good story, great makeup. I think the three of us might be at least as good of a blocker as he was. The edge was always crumbling with him in on blocking plays. It's been pretty bad up front, and you cannot win anything if you're pretty bad up front.
Yeah, Urban had obviously Ed Warner, really, really gifted offensive line coach. Not a great offensive coordinator per se, but a really good offensive line coach. And here's hoping Justin, gets cooking because we did see I thought we did see development last year from beginning of the season till end of the season. I thought the line developed decently.
It got better, but I can't explain the Cotton Bowl. You pull out Carson Hinsman and shuffle guys around. I'll never understand what that. We don't have to talk about it because it created one of the great early off seasons in Ohio State history in terms of being the aggressor. I don't know what they were trying to do. It'll never make sense to me.
Offensive line has been frustrating for me too, but I think in that game, that's a burn the tape and move on. Once Keenholz is in there and he can't throw because he hasn't been developed at all for reasons you already stated, probably it's just a jailbreak at that point. The line did not play well, and I don't understand. I don't know all the background of the shuffling and the Hinsman thing and all that, but I know that if there's more rushers than there are blockers, it really doesn't matter if it's 5 Orlando Paces. You're still probably in deep shit, and I think that was just as much of a problem in that game as anything because they knew that Keenholz was not going to be able to, it's not like he was going to carve him up.
Do you remember when Devin Brown got hurt and they kept him in the game? Because I don't think they noticed how badly hurt he was because, they had 4 jobs and they ran him in motion during a Wildcat. they limped him to the weak side. He couldn't walk and he was in motion. And the defender from Missouri is I'm not going to follow this guy.
keep one eye on him.
You don't think he's running a streak there?
No.
He's faking it. I'm going to shake it off.
That could have been a nod to why leaving him in like that when he was half dead was another sign of the confidence they had and Lincoln at that stage, which again, I don't put that at Lincoln's feet, but that just the whole, it was doomed.
Yeah. Chris, I'm with you, man. As soon as that game ended, I haven't thought about that game a second since. Mizzou's had a good D. I mean, Kirby Smart had a quote about when they played Missouri, how Missouri kicked their asses in the trenches. I think the phrase he used. And they had a good. I mean, Ohio State had a makeshift line and a quarterback that was thrown into the fire, and so I'm already talking about it more than I probably ever had into this.
Well, it was a classic 1-2 game as well, right? You talk about bowl games, which team actually cares about being there? Ohio State said some of the right things, but they didn't give a shit about being there. Missouri was big on it.
Marv sat the game out. The best player on Ohio State's team didn't play.
Like
let's roast someone else.
Cotton Bowl.
Yeah. Well, too much of the Cotton Bowl. But do you guys? I'll close it with this: if that game doesn't go down the way that it does in Ohio State, like
it was a blessing.
Gets a false sense of security, 17-14 win out of it instead of a 14-3 loss.
Yeah.
Do we see evil Ryan Day emerge in early January?
That's a fair point.
Probably
send Parker
not.
Fleming to Cardinal Health and start making like moves he should have made a year earlier.
I think we get probably 50% of that because you do still have the loss to Michigan, and that's 3 in a row, and those weigh on him heavily. But to your point, I think that if that Cotton Bowl doesn't happen, we don't get this version. We probably don't get Caleb Downs. We probably, Julian's saying, who knows? Maybe they do, but yeah, I mean that was a pretty ugly game. Let's roast someone else instead of the Ohio State offensive line for a hot
Sounds good.
Here.
My bad.
This portal, man. This portal. Let me just play this clip. Listen to this clip here from April 10th.
You are about to see the harsh, violent reality of the no rules transfer portal era on full display later this month. I am not overstating this. It will be the wildest transfer portal era that you've ever seen. And it's going to completely gut some of your teams. Just calling it like it is. And some of you are also going to become national championship contenders that don't think you are coming out of spring football. And it's going to be amazing.
That's Josh Pate, and I like Josh a lot. I think he's entertaining. I think he's got a good show. I know he's taken some criticism recently, and he's certainly taking criticism for this quote. But the wildest transfer portal era you'll ever see. Some of your teams are going to become national championship contenders. That were who is he talking about? Like Colorado or Bowling Green, or is he talking about West Virginia? Like who's he talking about there? Like that didn't happen.
He really went for it.
Yeah, talking about like good teams being gutted. Like, is Georgia going to be 4-8 this year? Did I miss something? We've talked. The numbers are up 43% in terms of guys in the portal compared to last year. But there's not a single guy that's in the portal that I'm like, that dude's a stud. I'd love to have him on the Ohio State roster. Not one single guy.
I think we were learning that timing is a big part of this, right? You got to strike while that guy's in the window because it closes very quickly. I think what we learned from he's trying to make it. Josh Pate. What he said was chopped liver. Get it? No.
Pate, we're going with food. We're going with food jokes. It took me a minute.
It's a pate.
Yeah, all right. Some cracker spread.
It worked. It worked for me.
It's a good joke. You can just have dumb co-hosts, man. That's it. That's the problem.
I'm just not cultured. I'm not eating either one of those things.
What's the downside of being wrong in the off season? We're talking about the guy. Being wrong. Like if being wrong was a negative, then Clay Travis would be digging ditches somewhere because that dude's like the king of getting it wrong. Pate, if he was right, he would have been seen as a visionary, but he was wrong. So we're talking about him on our show. So it's a win-win for him.
I think that the numbers still were obscene, but yeah, I wonder if you're going to make a move, is it more likely you're going to make it in that early window, in the spring window? Will it historically be a little bit more kind of leftovers?
What would have been like in the previous era, like when there was no transfer portal? The guys that we're not talking about now that are the numbers in the portal, they would have just sort of toiled in college, enjoyed their initial choice, and then you never would have heard of them again. Now they can maybe get like a Chipotle commercial on local TV or something somewhere else where they feel like, I can at least get a little bit of lucrative scratch out of being, born large and making it to FBS football program level. These aren't guys that are going to be difference makers. They're just looking for what's in it for them, which means the difference makers they've already found their new spots.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're already established, so they're going to do that in that first wave. Go ahead and get paid, not go through another spring camp at a place that, I think if you're doing one more spring camp, it's probably more likely you're trying to give it one last shot to see where you might fall on the depth chart kind of thing. And then if the writing's on the wall, which maybe it already was, but you didn't want to see it because you don't necessarily want to move, then, you pop into the portal kind of thing versus those December guys, the January, the early window is, that's
there's one tier.
Start the clock on getting to the next destination, right? Get in there.
It's the guys in the portal that you've heard of, and then the guys that get tampered with. And if you're in the portal late and you're not getting tampered with, then you're probably not going to move the needle anywhere.
Fun stat from 10 TV's Adam King. Before Brian Hartline got to Columbus, Ohio State had just 4 wide receivers ever taken in the top 20 of the NFL draft, ever. And in the last 4 years, Ohio State has had 4 go in the top 20, including Marv at number 4, the highest ever for a Ohio State wide receiver. What are some realistic expectations, Chris, for Marv in his first season out there?
I mean, you've seen some of the most recent guys in the draft get to 1,000 yards or certainly threaten it. So I think, Kyler Murray, how good is he anymore? Who's left there? I think he'll make a run because he's going to get targeted a lot. So I would expect him to have, he'd probably have 900 plus yards if he stays healthy.
They got to play the Niners twice. They got to play the Rams twice. What's the other team in that division?
They're always behind though. They're always losing. So they're probably going to throw it a lot.
Right. Yeah. And Kyler Murray is slippery, runs around, and Marv is, he's not going to be 90 yards downfield. He's going to be like, be that guy that gets separation from his defender because he can do that. I think he's going to flirt with 1,000 yards.
That'd be fun, man. I'm excited to see him as a pro. Cade Stover went in the 4th round to the Houston Texans, and man, starting to really like that. I've always, never was indifferent. The word you used earlier, that was me with Houston forever. Yeah. And then they get CJ Stroud. I'm like, this guy's really fun to watch in the NFL. And of course, I love
Noah Brown too.
Yeah. And watch him in his Ohio State days and loved him here. And you watch him just dicing NFL defense. It's like, I'm kind of a Houston Texans fan right now. Like, that's like, a B team or someone for me. I'll watch them and cheer for them. Now they get Cade. Was a captain, a good friend of CJ when he was in Columbus. CJ at Pro Day, threw with Cade the night before to kind of get warmed up. So that's a good fit together. And then Houston's GM, Nick Caserio, I hope I'm saying that correctly, called Cade elite, said, quote, he probably played hurt this year. I think he had an MCL or had an issue where, quite frankly, it would have been limited to some other players. But he just braced it up and he just kept playing football. I don't want to speak for D'Amico. He's talking about Ryan's the head coach. But I think we feel the same way. This is probably one of our favorite football players in the entire draft, regardless of position, because of his mentality, because of his mindset. Now, it's worth mentioning, 4th round pick, you're not coming in to start right away. He's got, Houston's already got a really good tight end, Dalton Schultz, and, Cade's going to develop, but he's also going to play this year. Like, let's be real. He's going to see the field. He should see the field. Ramzy, you're on the record as not being a fan of his blocking, and you've written about that recently on 11 Warriors, some of the tight end blocking, but his abilities as a receiver are incredible for a tight end.
Agree. I want Cade Stover to do very well in the NFL. He was the tight end room, so he had like 300 more snaps this past season than G. Scott Jr. did. So, which means he had more snaps at tight end than the rest of the room combined. So when you talk about Cade Stover not being a very good blocker, you're talking about the tight end room not being all that effective in blocking. I don't know if he's hurt or not hurt. We haven't had effective blockers at that position since Luke Farrell, and to a lesser, like Jeremy Ruckert was the lesser of the 2 blockers. He would be the best blocking tight end of the team right now, the 2020 version of him. And so, you think about when people would get so frustrated by bubble screens, like, why are we running that? And because the one guy that needs to be sealed off always gets through, and that's why it's getting blown up. Devin Brown's leg against Penn State, that was on account of a total turnstile move at the 1 yard line. Like, you don't have a lot of room to miss your guy at the goal line, and he found a way to do it. So I don't know if it's a lack of passion or a lack of instruction or a combination of the two, but as long as Ohio State, I would trade 10 Brown Super Bowls for one Ohio State national title, like straight up. They are not equal weights. Don't ask me about other sports because it'll be even more provocative.
I was going to say, we got to do the purity test with Chris. I think he would trade 10 Ohio State national titles for just like a wild card finish for the Yankees, but I want to make 100% sure.
Chris would trade like a win against Bowling Green for like fish tickets.
That's right.
That's right. I have the sickness badly. So when there's something that I think is an impediment for Ohio State to do what I and people who watch the show in May wanted to do, like it gets me wound up. And our tight ends have been a huge liability, and it's even worse because our offensive line is a liability. And you know what would cover up a struggling offensive line a little bit? A couple tight ends that could block.
Yeah. So do you think he's a guy that's going to work on that in the NFL, or is it just, hey, you're here to catch balls, we don't need you to be a great blocker?
No, he is going to have to do both because that's how the pros operate. I don't know any NFL franchises are like, our tight ends only catch passes.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but at the same time, it's a passing game now in both college and the NFL. Like, it's a pass first game. So you may overlook, and Gronk is a bad example because he could block his ass off. Gronk was a hell of a blocker.
That guy's truly, we say generational too much. That guy's like
and
lords over Brock Bowers. Like, they're not even the same species.
Kelsey can block too. I mean, those guys can do it all, but I wonder if there's almost a role for guys now that almost like a slot receiver. It's like a slot tight end to some degree. You know, you got these Edelman type guys and they catch balls underneath.
And a different position.
Do you do that? Do you do that with a tight end, a guy like Cade with his frame?
Yeah, especially with an accurate quarterback. Like they're playing with house money with receivers with CJ because dude was in the conversation for NFL MVP in December last year as a rookie. Mm-hmm. Like not like a redshirt freshman, but like a guy playing. He should have been a senior at Ohio State. He is Houston's set for a dozen years at quarterback, and so getting someone that's going to make him feel better living in Houston as a California kid who went to college in Ohio. GM CJ Stroud picked a guy that's just making his work environment less hostile.
Yeah. Chris, do you see Cade fitting in Houston? Seems like a very Houston kind of guy, like the town's vibes. Like I'm sure the first thing he's doing is trying to find like a mechanical bull when he gets there.
Might just bought one and put it in his living room.
Yeah, if I had that kind of money, I would.
What'd you spend your bonus on, Cade? Well, funny story.
See that John Deere and the mechanical bull in my garage? Both of them.
No, it does seem like a great fit for all the things you stated. I mean, CJ's close to him. They've got a tight end already. I think I hear what you're saying. You're not going to stick around the NFL if you can't block. Don't get me wrong, but I do think the game can be situational, especially with backups, that kind of thing. Because Schultz is great. I mean, it's really not like they're trying to eliminate his snaps, right, or reduce his snaps. I don't think that's really what they're trying to do. So yeah, I could see him fitting in there. I'm with you. Is a bad blocker now. Everything about, I mean, the kid switched positions. He has, played hurt. So I don't think it's not that you said it was, but I don't think it's a passion thing, right? Part of me just does think, coaching, that kind of, like, you can get better. It's not like he was born a tight end. He's bounced around and whatever else. If he can get some elite level instruction, he could probably become has the potential to become a serviceable blocker. I think he was obviously pretty versatile in college in that regard. So yeah, at college, watching him block was painful. Do I think he can improve? Yes. Do I think he's a better receiver than a blocker forever? Also, yes. But that doesn't mean he can't carve out a role on a team like that where he doesn't need to be, he's not a day one starter.
Yeah, well said. I mean, he was a running back and a linebacker in high school.
Right. And the fifth Big Ten tight end taken in the draft, too.
That's what we do, man. That's what we do up here. We have recliners, we eat corn-based food, and we put tight ends in the league, man. That's
right.
One last draft bit. Michigan, Harbaugh, and a lot of people in the program were making noise all season. They knew they had a good team. They were making noise about potentially breaking the NFL draft record for most picks by one college in one draft. And that record's 15. Georgia set it in 2022. Ohio State had 14 in 2004. LSU had 14 in 2020 as well. Wolverines finished with 13, so 2 off, which sounds close, but it's not. I mean, you're not even striking distance.
Late round guys too.
Yeah, and just one first round pick. So that gives me some joy. I'm going to be honest here, man. It gives me a lot of joy that they were like making actual noise ahead of the draft all season about breaking that record. Didn't come close. Had one first round pick. McCarthy was their first round pick, though. You guys like where he ended up? Do you think he's such a weird one, man? Like, I don't know how good he's going to be in the NFL. I truly don't.
I have a hard time not liking a guy who grew up dreaming of playing for Ohio State, who was told Actually, you should go to Michigan, go 15-0, and we'll take a guy with a helicopter dad who's going to end up going to Syracuse instead. I have no animus for JJ McCarthy, even though he does. He's got kind of a smarminess about him, but that might be my own
They all do.
Michigan lenses.
Yeah, you get there, it sticks to you right.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I don't think he arrived there with it. It just kind of clings to you. Yeah, I'm the same. I mean, he's a Michigan quarterback, so I'm not going to cheer for him to succeed, but they just only asked him to do enough to win. So I'm trying to figure out, like, I buy the whole winner tag or whatever, but at the next level, can he, game manage his way? We'll have to see how that pans out. But part of me just wonders with this run on quarterback. I mean, they always get overdrafted, but then the other side of me is like, man, we talked about it before on this show. So many people get paid to evaluate quarterbacks and they don't do it accurately. It's such a giant toss up that, I don't know how anybody could have a super passionate, I guarantee you he's going to fail or he's going to be great. Like, I just don't know how you know.
Absolutely the right take. We're one season away, removed from Carolina mortgaging its draft capital to not take CJ Stroud.
Did you guys catch what David Tepper did the other day? Did you guys see that? The owner of Carolina. What did you guys a couple months ago?
Punch a fan or something?
Like, a couple months ago, you saw he threw a drink on someone from the suite.
Oh yeah,
right?
That was the other day. Like, he did something else. Like,
no, he did something else. Yeah, he's a billionaire. There was a restaurant in Charlotte that had a sign up on the outside of the restaurant that said, "Please let the GM and coach make the picks this year." Tepper pulled over at the restaurant, walked inside, asked who put the sign up. There's like surveillance footage of him at like the hostess table. I'm like, you're a billionaire, dude. What are you doing? Like, I don't.
That much money makes you really stupid in ways that you're sort of blind to. Look at the guy that runs Twitter now.
Yeah.
All he had to do is be content with his companies getting in on PayPal at the right time and just being a guy people thought of as potentially a smart guy.
Yep.
And now, like, he is out in the open, fully stupid on a daily basis because he just wasn't content with what he had. David Tepper's, billionaires shouldn't exist. Different podcast, but look what it does to people, man.
Dude, if I have $1 billion, I'm never getting on the internet again.
You'll never hear from me again.
Yeah, I won't be stopping at restaurants complaining about signs. Like, I'll delete all my emails. Like, you will never hear from me again. Like,
you
straight
think
up.
I'll be on social media if I had $1 billion?
Yeah. Well, now I got to like some tweets real quick. Let me get on here with my... No way. Not in a million years.
If a bunch of Saudis showed up, like, we have a deal for you. I'm like, no, I'm not the right guy.
Yeah.
Talk to someone else. I'm too busy being a billionaire.
That's right. Yeah, I would. I'd probably get rid of my smartphone. I'd go back to like a Nokia flip phone, man. I'd just do it big time. Last bit of news this week that we want to touch on. Some big news. I think Monday, Pete Thamel from ESPN had a report saying the leaders of college sports are involved in, quote, deep discussions to reach a legal settlement that would create a framework for revenue sharing with players. And this is, again, something we've heard and we all know it's coming and we all do. But this is there's some teeth to this time. Said the NCAA and conferences are defendants, obviously, to a class action suit, House versus NCAA. That goes to court January 2025. And the settlement could cost billions. So they're kind of moving. And the Big Ten and the SEC are leading a little bit on this, despite what the other conferences will say publicly. But Thamel said sources indicated a top-end revenue sharing number per school is $20 million. That's some good money.
That's almost double Ohio State's purse for player securement.
Yeah, I mean,
Ryan said $11 million was what Ohio State had to spend.
Yeah, somewhere in that range. 20 can get you a lot of places, and there's precedents too for like sports settling a case, and that settlement. And this is in Thamel's piece, like becoming part of the framework for the league. Reggie White's free agency in 1993, they settled with him, and that became the kind of the new free agent rules.
Yeah.
Dennis Dodd had a report yesterday on Wednesday saying, the name of this is the modern model, and I've heard that Trev Alberts is kind of leading the charge on this of all people. And then also Wednesday, a bowl season director, Nick Carparelli, told Yahoo Sports that he expects NIL to soon come in-house and for athletes to sign binding compensation contracts with schools that will require them to play in bowls and CFP games, kind of eliminating or greatly reducing opt-outs, which, bowls, that was the highest thing on their wish because they were about to be irrelevant. Because if there was nothing coming to keep guys from skipping bowls, they're going to play CFP only, and bowls are about to peace out. Some quick thoughts. I mean, January 2025 trial date, that means we're getting this settlement in the next 6 months. because they're not going to go to court. Because they go to court and lose, the NCAA could owe way more than they think and could be gone forever. So we're going to know something in 6 months, which is kind of good news. Big and SEC, of course, have that advisory alliance and are leading on this. And, 20 is a lot, man. It can get you a really good college
Premier League. We're getting a Premier League out of this.
A really good basketball team. You can get both for $20 million. And then, a little bit left over for Olympic sports. So I've got a couple things that are popping into my head is one is like the Big Ten and SEC are quickly going to say 20 million is not enough. And some of the, it's why you see Clemson and Florida State like trying like hell to get out where they're at, because there's going to be that time soon when the SEC and the Big Ten have a separate agreement that's going to be worth more than what some of these other conferences, certainly the MAC and Big 12 and ACC probably.
Yeah.
And then you get into some Title IX thorniness too, because there's a lot of people that will say Title IX only guarantees equal opportunity. You just have to field the sports. You just have to have competitions. It does not mean equal pay. And furthermore, like if these leagues came out and said, here's 20 million or 30 million or whatever, we're going to pay football and basketball only, and someone from fencing or whatever sues, and it winds up at the Supreme Court, like I'm not convinced that the Supreme Court right now, I mean, they've already struck down affirmative action. I'm not convinced they would hold Title IX up, honestly. I don't know if I would be eager to take a case to the Supreme Court if I was a Title IX advocate in the next 10, 15 years.
Yeah. No, and the whims of the Supreme Court would actually pass the red face test if they introduced the idea of market value and free market into a discussion, used fencing as an example there. Fencing does not have the market cap or the revenue or the balance sheet that any of the sports we've been talking about do. And so there's a math problem that transcends the gender equity and the sports equity discussion. And I think that they could rule on that and people would be like, you know what? Yeah, the numbers don't bear out. But they could also implement a scale and some opportunity. Like you could have said 1990, was it 96 when the WNBA started? Like there's no market for this. They had to create a market for it. So I could see arguing for, we need to create an argument for, or a market or an opportunity for fencing to, show its value, to get its consumers. And maybe there's a ramp or some sort of a period that universities could put into it, because frankly, that's a low investment, high ceiling bet. Like what's the worst thing that could happen? Oh, a sport that makes no money continues to make no money. Like it would make good headlines. It would give college kids opportunities. And if they're right, hey, they just made some money. If they're wrong, kids are still fencing.
I worried fencing just wouldn't be a thing. I mean, I think it's more likely that if there's pressure on the revenue to that degree, and even if your cap on athletes is X $1 million or whatever, whether you're Big Ten or SEC, it doesn't mean you can't spend extra money on facilities or those kinds of things so that you can try to create an edge in a situation where maybe the salary cap or whatever tries to equalize it like in the NFL. Well, then how do you sweeten the pot? When you try to sweeten it by the facilities and some of these other things to make it attractive. So I feel like it would just funnel more money to football at a place like Ohio State. And would they ultimately say, hey, we already have as many varsity sports? I mean, does Ohio State still have the most? It's like them, Stanford, handful, right? 36 or
36
whatever it is,
34.
varsity sports. Yeah. Just seems like at some point we just have to say, well, some of these are just going to go away. I'm not disadvantaging just the women's fencing team, if that's a thing, versus the men. I'm just eliminating some of these sports. And maybe that's not at Ohio State, but there's still more have-nots than haves in the Power Five. With some of those schools that probably already don't have 36 sports, don't get me wrong, but would some of those just be on the chopping block?
That's a good point. I wonder sometimes if we're in the golden era of like the Ohio State athletic department, the largest of it, because what's going to happen. Like every school gets 20 million. Ohio State's going to say, okay, 10 for football, 5 for basketball, and then 5 for every other sport. They're going to try to do the noble thing. Right. And then Kentucky the next day is going to be like, we're going down to 4 sports. We got football, basketball, women's soccer, and that's all we have. And they're still Title IX compliant because they have 2 men and two male and 2 female sports at that point in time. And then the first time Ohio State loses to Kentucky in the CFP, fans are going to be livid and saying, hey, they're giving 99% of their money to football. Why are we still paying X?
You just got to find the Caitlin Clark of fencing and then have her win matches from 30 feet away from her opponent. And all of a sudden fencing's the destination sport.
Women's basketball.
the non-revenue giant exaggerated air quotes sports, I think we now know it's star power and it's promotion.
Yeah.
And people will watch.
Yeah. I mean, there's three. There's women's and men's basketball, and there's football. And I think those are the big three. And then they're tiered. Obviously, football's way up here. And then you have men's basketball. And women's basketball is pretty close to men's basketball based on some TV numbers this past season.
There's a huge ramp. Women's hockey is awesome. Gymnastics, which the Big Ten generally kind of barely participates in, is great. I can't get past the aluminum bat thing for baseball. That's a me thing in college. Lacrosse is fun. Bing! I mean, I get that we're like three principals at 11 Warriors, and we'll watch anything. It's got Scarlet and Gray on it, but I think that there's a lot of upside. They need some corporate development people to elevate some of the offerings here.
What do you do though? I mean, like you can try to make fencing a thing, but it's not like a new sport. Fencing's been around for like probably 200, 300 years.
No, but
like,
we're riffing here. But think about like what you're wearing. If it like lit up in school color, the other team's other school colors when you got a hit, like that would be kind of fun. Like glowing puck type of stuff where you're like, Ohio State's fencing Michigan. The Michigan guy turned scarlet and gray because he just got. Dude, I'd be watching that. We'd be jiffing the hell out of that and posting it on the site.
Put the opposing football coach in a dunk tank, and every time you score a point, they fall down in the water. Like you got Sharon Morgan.
So much you can do, man. There's so much you can do.
I do like that idea. We should bring this to the athletic department. We have ideas on how to make fencing a massive sport.
Tell 1870. I got $100 on synchronized swimming. We're going to do something.
I think women's college hoops over the next 4 or 5 years is going to be a very interesting case study because I do think there is general increased interest in the sport. But I also think Caitlin Clark is this unicorn that created something that you can't possibly sustain. I don't think their goal's even realistic to sustain that. But will you continue to see a slower growth, or will you see it start to moderate or potentially decline? I'm not saying that I think it would decline, but it's just going to be interesting to see, to your point, like, you need a Caitlin Clark. Well, that's fine. Well, then you need the next Caitlin Clark. And they clearly don't grow on trees considering what we saw last year and the records that it created and, in viewership and those kinds of things. So,
do you see Doug Gottlieb on Twitter? Was like, look at her shooting form's terrible. Is Indiana going to fix that? And someone quoted him was like, Caitlin Clark's 3-point shooting percentage is higher than Doug Gottlieb's shooting percentage in college.
She never stole from anyone either, allegedly.
She never committed credit card fraud either, right?
No, never did that.
Sorry,
Chris. I think you're right, man. I think women's sports are enjoying a moment right now, whether it's soccer, hockey, basketball, but they also got a little gasoline on the women's basketball side. Caitlin Clark was like a generational type college experience, man. And Fox was bragging about how their women's hoops numbers were so high compared to men's this year. And it's this year, and it's because of Caitlin Clark. I mean, like everywhere she went, the games were sellouts. People are watching on TV. She was a lot of fun to watch.
They like the
show.
They got
personalities. I mean, they coaches too. Mulkey.
They do.
Yeah, but
Mulkey's a personality. She's a bad guy. She's a great villain.
King of the Hill character, man. Once you frame Mulkey as a King of the Hill character, like you can't unsee her any other way. Like she's out there like yelling at Boomhauer, man. Like
it's great. And you know what? South Carolina's gone back to back. They're like incredibly skilled, but they're going inside with like aliens and scoring from 3 feet out. And that's not the show. The show is Caitlin from the logo.
Yeah,
keeping that game close against a bunch of aliens.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Steph Curry. Yeah. Steph Curry. I stayed up till 2 a.m. watching prime Steph Curry games because Golden State starts way too late. They should fix that. Move Oakland closer.
Can we get that fixed? Yeah. I don't know. We'll see what shakes out. But I think the next 6 months, again, that trial date's January 25. And that's, you don't want to go to trial because they typically always want to settle before they get there. No. That's when they start getting murdered by billable hours and lawyers do their thing. But man, we'll find out something here soon. I'm excited. I am. I think that, I think that transfers drive coaches nuts. Not so much the transfers, but the tampering that leads to the transfers. And anything you can make all the coaches in college football mad about, you usually have a good chance of getting that fixed. So I think this agreement will fix that. It'll get guys playing in the postseason. I think it's going to do a lot to fix the sport. I think that at the same time, sport's going to be very, very different than the sport we grew up with. We have blood feuds with Oregon and Washington now, and never thought we'd be at that point. I mean, so I don't know. I think it'll be different, but I think fans will appreciate how it's kind of fixed some of the stuff that's happened the last 3 years, which probably needed to happen. but Emmert and the NCAA just did a terrible job of letting it happen instead of taking the lead and doing it in a good way. Like they just like, okay, we're done. We're throwing our hands up. You guys do whatever you want. So I'm excited to see where it goes.
I thought of something while watching them sort of try to figure out what this is going to look like. Franchise tagged players in the FBS, like one guy this guy's not tamperable, not poachable, and even if you throw money at him, he's not legally allowed to leave.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
The Blocko jersey, that would be fun. I mean, not for him, but
are we heading towards a situation where you have a commissioner or someone with some more power than the NCAA has right now? Like, can you get something out of this new deal? Is that something they could get? Just think about the tampering thing, man. Like they hate it. Every coach on earth hates tampering. And all equally hated them as much as they possibly can. So that's, I guess, what kind of leads me to believe there may be something there where there's some teeth, man. You can't do this, you can't do that. These are the rules. These are the guidelines. Something needs to happen with the leadership, and I think Baker may be the guy, but they're going to have someone setting some rules, setting some guidelines. Like, what's to say, like, if you have a $20 million cap, Auburn's definitely going to be bringing suitcases of cash on top of the $20 million. It's going to be off the books. Like, we know this already. Not Auburn. It's a school like Auburn.
How is that different than now?
Yeah. And honestly, how has that not happened in the NFL? Like, how has Jerry Jones not said, okay, sign for X, I'm going to slip you $2 million wire from another bank account? And the reason it hasn't happened in the NFL is because they can be punitive. They find out,
and there's honor amongst thieves too. They're all billionaires.
Well, and they find out there's 31 other owners that are going to punish the hell out of Jerry Jones. He's not going to be drafting for like 3 years, so that shit happens. So I think
if you fuck with one of them, then the other 31 will gang up on you. So that's honor amongst thieves. That's the reason it works.
You don't want David Tepper coming to your house, man. I mean, that guy's a bad one. So
Jason, I heard you were talking shit on the YouTube.
Yeah, Tepper will come after us. So you do need some kind of commissioner, some kind of czar, some kind of framework to punish people that skirt the rules. I don't know whether that's the NCAA.
It's not. They can barely function as it is. You're asking them to do more than they currently do now. They can barely do what they do now. You need an organization to run it. It'll be one for hire. There's plenty of money.
Chris, any ideas on who can run this?
Greg Sankey.
Ooh, be a good one.
I mean, it's easy to hate on him in the Big Ten, but I think he's been pretty successful, and I think he fights like hell for his league, and I think he's pretty influential guy.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember back to how they chose Pete Rozelle, how that originated, and it was like an owner compromise. Like, we wanted this guy, the other owners wanted this guy. Let's pick this guy who works in marketing and go with someone else. Sankey would be a good choice. There's some guys out there that could do it for sure. I mean, Oliver Luck, maybe someone that could fill a role like that. Has got experience and seems to have friends across the space. But yeah, I guess general point is hold on to your butts. The next 6 months, we're going to get some clarity, and I look forward to some clarity. It's been a little crazy for a couple of years.
And some fencing. I'm
fencing. Dunk tank, fencing, light up uniforms, all that stuff. Thanks for joining us, man. Anything we're forgetting, guys?
I think we've covered all the bases today.
Twice.
All the bases. All right. As always, be good to each other and take care of each other.